Okay, so um, one of the things that's very important is that we spend a lot of time understanding our mindset. Our mindset is a critical part of our journey into wholehearted living. Wholehearted living, however, is not limited to mindset, and this is very, very important. You know, we are living in a time in the personal development world that we live in at the moment where we're seeing a beautiful, beautiful shift where for the past couple of years, maybe until the beginning of 2020, maybe 2019, there was a lot of thrust around success and mindset. What I love about what I'm seeing now is that there's more and more voices coming along that is asking us and encouraging us and inviting us to develop the other parts of us so we can live more integrated and more wholehearted lives. And I'm quite sure that when I go through this presentation that you'll have a lot of comments. So I'm going to invite you to just add your comments, share what you have to share, ask your questions, because, you know, for me, I'm be very honest, for me, the journey away from mindset, it's a year-long journey. I'm still figuring out, I'm still a toddler. But I know that there are those of you who have got a lot more experience in the other dimensions, and I really invite your comments on that in that space. So I want to share with you my specific brand or framework for working with creating a life or and a career that helps you to really, really combat the destructive forces that come up in our lives. I call it burnout, but it's all that stuff that ends up sapping us and draining us and taking us away from our own sanity and taking us away from, you know, that feeling that we have got autonomy and authority in our lives. So when you're
Mm.
feeling so utterly, utterly like you're being shaken around by life, then there's a good chance that this framework is one that you can use. And what I love about this framework is that it is applicable both in your personal life, in your professional life, in all the different parts of your life. I would say lives. Everyone has one life, I'm hoping. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we are reincarnated. Anyway, um,
Mm.
so the framework is, I call it ESP. And in ESP, there are a number of elements. The first element is energy. We need energy to live our lives. Now, are we creating lives where we are able to replenish our energy? And do we understand that energy is a dynamic thing in our lives? Energy isn't one thing, and generating energy is also not one thing. Then there's this concept of sovereignty. I'm not going to be going too much into sovereignty, and I'm not going to be going too much into personal brand in the session, but sovereignty is that sense that you are in charge of your life. You're the monarch of your life. You are king or queen of your life, and you run it. I'm going to share a few more things in a later slide, but please understand that none of the elements actually work if you don't exercise sovereignty. We talk about empowerment in South Africa a lot, but the truest empowerment is the power that we seize for ourselves. And when we step into our sovereignty, we very often have to go against all the patterns that are part of who we are from an age when we don't even remember, you know, when we are little and we don't even have language. That's the patterning that we have to go against when we claim our sovereignty. This is also part of that shadow work that we spoke about in that first evening. This is also part of that inner child healing. For us to claim our sovereignty, there's a lot of nervous system trauma that we might have to overcome in order to fully stand in our power. The last element of the framework that I work with is the personal brand. And inside the personal brand is this thing of, you know, really deciding who we want to be. And the personal brand is not, what I'm talking about here is not only the brand that we exude in the world out there. The personal brand is the brand that we carry for ourselves, the one that we know keeps us in integrity with ourselves. And personal brand for me is actually where I started my whole coaching journey. I started out in personal branding, and for a long time, I walked away from personal branding as a part of my discipline because it was always about the external. Now that it is about the internal for me, it is one that has got so much incredible power, and I'm looking forward to sharing a bit of that with you. Now, when I'm talking about energy, I really am talking about reunion. Ladies, please, please interrupt me, put messages in the chat box, um, talk to me. It keeps me honest as I share this with you.
Engage.
It keeps me honest. um, so for me, when I talk about energy, one of the first pit stops for many professionals, and I know that both of you come from very demanding environments, is this idea that we are so separated from ourselves. When we come into the working life, so much of our lives gets so busy that it becomes invisible to us. And we become inactive in certain parts of our lives. We almost need like reminders and post-it notes to remember that that is part of who we are and part of our life. And if it isn't on a post-it note, and if it isn't in our diary, we forget that we are a complete human being. And so a lot of the work that I think we have to do for ourselves so that we can live wholeheartedly is to come back into union with ourselves. And that union is about our physical body, it's about our emotional body, it's our mental body. And very importantly, if resilience is part of what you want to accomplish, it's your spiritual body. Now, one of the things that I once said to my coach in the beginning of my coaching journey with her was, I can't remember, she asked me something about my body. I was quite stiff or something like that. She asked me about my body and my fitness routine, whatever. And I just looked at it and I said to her, my body is nothing more than transport for my head, for my brain. I don't have any other use for my body. It's just transport. So that is an indication of how, and I'm not unique as a professional, as a corporate person, as I was back then. I'm not unique in that. We overcompensate. Our identity lies very much in our brain, in our thinking. I called myself a knowledge worker. And so it was all about my value set over here. And so this is about restoring cohesion between the different parts and understanding that we need to be in relationship with the different parts. Much of the session is going to be about that particular aspect. Another aspect of energy is making sure that we've got space for restoration and pacing. Are we working at a pace that is aligned to who we are and what we need? Each and every single one of us has a different clock. And when we are working to the clock of the office, and I know that in this lockdown reality, a lot of people found the ability to work at their own rhythm. And they can see the benefits of working at their own rhythm. And the question is always, are we pacing the way in which we're working? And are we pacing it to our own rhythms? Now, another element of pacing is how much work we take on. And there's a lot of responsibility here on employers. But there's also a question around our own boundaries and our own ability to advocate for ourselves that is involved in the pacing thing. Then there's the emotion journey. I'm very passionate about the emotion journey. I think that so much of us have no idea how to be in a relationship with our emotions. This is a huge conversation, but I want to share with you that your emotions, and I shared this in yesterday's session as well, our emotions are not there for us to be in conflict with. Every single emotion that comes to us has a job. It has a way in which it wants to serve us. It has a way in which it wants to be part of creating choice for us, part of creating empowerment for us, part of creating better and more strength for us. But what we do is we often find ourselves resisting the idea that an emotion can be uncomfortable. And so we resist the emotion and we don't allow it to come. And the invitation I have for you is that if you want to live wholeheartedly, you have to make space for those emotions that are difficult and uncomfortable. We can really only align to our highest selves when we're able to sit through the journey of darkness. There's countless people who have said that, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. We end up suffering because we don't meet with our emotions. Our emotions just want to have a cup of tea with us, go for a walk with us. This is an important part. The person who endures burnout is the person who does not engage in the emotional journey. And unfortunately, in the male population, it's far more dominant. And so you've got things like higher suicide rates, you've got higher heart attack rates, you've got higher stroke rates. There's all these things that are connected to emotion that is not being processed, that they are suffering through at a very higher level. The next element for me in energy is about finding comfort, and that's our nervous systems and getting a way for our nervous systems to start calming down. Because if our nervous systems are not calm, what we end up doing is being hypervigilant. And when we are hypervigilant, it's exhausting. It's incredibly exhausting. And we end up being hypervigilant about things that doesn't even need our attention. So one of the ways in which we can reduce the level to which we are hypervigilant, one of the ways in which we can reduce our strained nervous systems is actually through play. And when I say play to adults, they give me like a very strange response. But we as adults, I'm like, when did we decide that we don't play? We have to play. We are human beings, we have the same rhythms, we have the same needs. The fact that we are grown up, this idea that grown-ups don't play is just a construct. We all need play, we all need pleasure, we all need joy. And then there's rituals. Rituals are such an important part in our energy. And if we don't have rituals to restore our energy, we end up doing it on an ad hoc basis. We cannot only restore our energy on the weekend. We cannot only restore our energy on the holiday. We cannot only restore our energy when we go for a spa day once in a while. We need rituals that help us to engage all our parts and gives us space to restore and to recover. Sorry. The resilience skill that we ultimately need to maintain our energy is actually mindfulness. And so in my framework, I talk a lot and I help you to cultivate mindfulness as part of the way in which you are able to come back and you're able to carry life's challenges, life's opportunities, life's burdens at a higher level. Without mindfulness, I think that we just end up being so caught up, so intertwined in our thinking that we don't actually see that there's a difference between the triggers that trigger us and the way in which we respond. That we can separate them, that we can calm things down for ourselves, and then we can really and truly start engaging in a way that is energizing for us, without our nervous systems being triggered by the triggers of our lives. Any questions, ladies? Any comments?
No, I don't have any questions, but listening to what you're saying, it actually allows me to go back and look at my life and how I've been doing things. And since COVID lifted and now everybody's back at work and stuff, it's become that rat race again where you say, we don't need weekends in order to replenish ourselves. We need to find the time, find a ritual, that you can tap into to kind of de-stress. And I found that since I'm back at the office, I don't do that anymore, that when the weekend comes, I'm so exhausted that I don't even want to make up my own bloody bed, excuse my French, and you're literally counting down the hours when Monday is back again. And it's like, okay, here we go again. And it's you back into it. Yeah. So thank you for that, Safia. It's actually made me really think about starting a ritual where I can actually go and create my own depressurizing system or whatever you call it, on a daily basis.
I also think that we underestimate how resilient our bodies are. We underestimate how resilient our emotional systems are. We underestimate how resilient our mental and our spiritual systems are, because we actually don't need a lot of rest. You'll be fascinated by, if you've got the right rituals for you, because the rituals that I need and the ones that you need are all different, but the right rituals, you can have 2 or 3 minutes in a day that can help you to restore yourself. Very often, we are designed so magnificently that very often we need very little in order to restore ourselves. Cool. So the next one is sovereignty. So for me, we're not going to spend too much time here, but for me, I just want to share with you at a very superficial level that I shared yesterday my model for self-love. I'll share it with you again at the end of this slide, at the end of this presentation. But, self-love is that ability to make things safe inside of you, that ability to have grace and mercy with yourself, that ability to find the way that works for you to do what is right for you. Not to do what is right for you in a way that feels like you're going to screw something up or break something. And then also not to do things because you're complying with something. It's about moving away from must, should, and have to. When you are starting to really become the advocate for your own self-love, or for loving yourself, the I want to's start to emerge, and the I don't have to's start to emerge very spontaneously, because suddenly that cohesion and alignment becomes the way in which you engage. The only thing that I want to share here with you is that no one is going to give your sovereignty to you. You've got to take your sovereignty. If the world can take something from you, if they can take their pound of flesh from you, they're going to take it. You've got to claim your sovereignty. There are 4 superpowers that we all have, and that superpower lives within the global superpower. And the superpowers you have, for anyone who's ever done mindset work, I know, Beverly, you've just shared with me that you're doing some stuff around it. You would know your 4 superpowers is you control your thoughts, you control your emotions, you can control what you say, what you do, and how you show up to the world, to people, to challenges, to situations. And all of that is wrapped in a bubble called our imagination. There is no such thing as reality. Each and every single one of us is creating reality with our mind, with our belief systems, with our patterns, with our habits, with what makes us us. And if we can just suspend our reality as we know it and step into our imagination, we can create alternate ways of engaging with reality, and we can shift things. But it requires that you know what you want. And very, very few people actually know what they want. I know just about 95% of the people that I know, if you ask them what don't you want, they can tell you what they don't want to, they want to stop feeling. They can tell you that. But then you say, but now what do you want? But what do you want? And they look at you with a bit of surprise, because they've been so focused, and this is so important, we're so focused on what we don't want. But what we don't realize is that when we focus on what we don't want, we end up recreating what we don't want. It becomes our point of focus. It becomes the lens through which we see things. It becomes our reality through the manifestation of where we put our focus, where we put our attention. So my invitation to you is that if you are wanting to own your life experience, become clear on what you want. What do you want for now? What do you want for 5 minutes from now? What do you want for 10 years from now? What do you want? Stop focusing on the things you don't want. Because it's like algorithms on the internet. If you type into the internet, I don't want to see stuff about cabbage, what's going to come up? Only cabbage is going to come up, right? Because the algorithm is tracking what you're putting in, and you're putting in cabbage. So focus on what you want. So if you want to step into your sovereignty, you also have to start knowing what it is that trips you up. Absolutely, Beverly. You have to know what trips you up. There are, in the work environment, there are certain things that is very, very pervasive, specifically around women, but it is true for everyone else. It is perfectionism. It is not asking for what you want. It's imposter syndrome. It's the inner critic. It's procrastination. These are the things that typically come up in the workplace. But not having boundaries, for instance, these are the things that trip up your power. You've got to become clear on what trips up your power. And then you've got to set up and say to yourself, so I know this is how I get tripped up. What do I want instead? And how do I build the capacity to create what I want? Right? So that's your power gaps. And the critical resilience skill that you have to learn in sovereignty is optimism. Because there is not going to be a version of reality where life doesn't happen. Every level of life is going to challenge you. You can be Richard Branson type successful. Is he successful? I don't know anymore. These guys fluctuate all over the show. But you know what I mean? You can be like that.
I think he's still there somewhere.
He's still there. You can be like this very, very uber successful person, but you're still going to be met with challenges in your life. There is no version of reality where you're not going to be met with challenges. So how do you, and the reason why I put the critical element of sovereignty as the critical resilience skill for sovereignty as optimism is because very often when we become successful, we become so afraid we're going to lose our success that the very success we have becomes our kryptonite. And so you've got to be able to keep looking forward, to keep looking into the positive and keep looking into the light so you can keep growing. Okay. So that is sovereignty, personal brand. This is about being the CEO. And this is about knowing your stuff, knowing who you are at your essence. And this is about creating connection and community and strategies for renewal for yourself. So if you are only renewing yourself once a year, it's not going to work. You need daily, weekly, monthly renewal strategies. And one of the things that you have to renew is your interests, your curiosities. And if you don't do that, you will fall apart. And so you need rituals, again, for this part of your life. So the first one of rituals was mindful rituals. It's really about going in. Here it's rituals about both going in as well as going out and external. You need to have rituals around connecting with people, rituals around reading new books, rituals around just all the things that keep you engaged in your life, okay, and keep you aligned in your life. So the question I have, and maybe this isn't true for you as you are here right now, although Mel just mentioned the rat race kind of thing, but the question is, are you tired? Are you anxious? Do you find that you are stressed very often? And do you find that you are stressed in situations where in a previous version of yourself, that situation wouldn't have stressed you out? Do you find that you're exhausted and overwhelmed? Are you numbing yourself out watching TV until endless hours? Or are you sleeping beyond what is needed by any physical body's sleep requirement? If these are questions to which you answer yes, or yes at certain points, then you have to start to recognize that you've got an outflow of energy without a commensurate inflow of energy. And you've got to start asking yourself, do you have permission to get your energy back? Because part of the reason why you are experiencing what you are experiencing is because you've got belief systems that says you have to be doing things in a particular way, and it's not serving you. It's not a restorative, nurturing, and enabling belief system. And when we go against our belief systems resist. And so you have to start asking, what permission do I have to move forward so that I can replenish my energy? Do I have permission to tell my boss I'll be leaving at 3:30 in the afternoon because I have to go for a walk? Right? Do I have permission to tell my boss that I won't be doing X in the evenings or I won't be doing Y? And in order for me to have that permission, what stuff must change inside of me so that I can claim that sovereignty for myself? And these are hard conversations. I am not saying for a moment that these are easy things. These are literally things that each and every single one of us have to have individual strategies to deal with and to grow through. So I mentioned in day one that burnout is a function of exhaustion, cynicism, and cynicism is that idea that, the world is just a crap place. This is beyond me. This isn't my fault, not my responsibility. I'm powerless in the face of all of this. Beverly, what's that smile I'm seeing?
I was wondering if that's a picture of me, but then I know I'm not there. I'm not there. I absolutely love what you're saying, because I mean, I can talk for long about this, but we have to control it, and it's not that easy, but I think we have to be intentional about what we allow and what not. So for the last 2 weeks I've been going into office, and I can definitely find that I do less. So the amount of time that I now use to travel, I used to go for a run, or I did reflection. And for a long time, I was in that discipline of doing daily reflection. And I stopped that, but it's because I go to bed too late, so I can't get up early enough. And it's really, we have to be intentional. Otherwise, we just slip into old bad habits every time.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying, it must be, you have to be intentional. And being intentional is about knowing and declaring what you want. And you have to declare it for yourself, and you have to declare it for the world that you are engaging with. The third element of burnout is a perceived loss of efficacy. And so already I'm hearing people say, not just the two of you on the call, but I'm hearing quite a few people that are saying, oh, I'm ending up doing less. I'm not doing it at the same level I used to. 2020 was actually, it was a big adjustment, but I was doing more. I was accomplishing more. There was more efficacy. And so suddenly there's a trade-off that is busy happening. And I want to remind you, you need to slow down. You need to pause, and you need to start looking for where you are hemorrhaging your efficacy. Because when you can start to recognize where you are hemorrhaging your efficacy, both for yourself as well as for your employer, you can start having a conversation to say, let's fix this. But if you don't pause, if you just stay on the hamster wheel, you can't really have an intelligent conversation with anyone. You can't even have a conversation with yourself if you don't pause. Okay. So, when I do my slides here in the space, they just crumble and collapse, make it very sad. Can't fix this. Okay. So one of the big things of my framework is not to learn new things. My framework is not about learning fancy new things. I'm not going to take you to walk on coal or anything like that. Those are awesome mindset things, but that's not the stuff that you need to come back to a place of vitality and to come back to a place of restoration. We have everything that we need. We are designed beautifully. We are designed spectacularly, and you must remind yourself every single day of how spectacularly you are designed, because you are designed to repair yourself. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, we are designed to repair ourselves if we can bring ourselves into cohesion with ourselves. That reunion is essential, because when we are in union with ourselves, everything we need can be deployed so that we can repair ourselves. You are not broken. You don't need fixing. All you need is solitude every now and then. Everything you need is in pausing, in reassessing, in reevaluating, and recreating. You have to remember who you are. You've got to remember who you are. You've got to make space. Now, this is so important, and I get a bit emotional here when I talk about this thing, but you've got to remember that, yes, there are billions of people on Earth, but each and every single one of us billions of people on Earth are walking around with God's spark inside of us. Each and every single one of us travel through this universe, or this earth, this rock that we're spinning on, with divinity. Okay? And we all have magic inside of us. And one of the things that happens somewhere just before we become teenagers, or just before we become like that 8, 9, 10-year-old age, is we forget how magical we are. We forget how special we are. We forget how imaginative we are. We forget how we have everything on board to make this world different for ourselves and the people around us. Remember when you were little and people asked you, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be when you're grown up? What were the answers? And I can bet you that the answers were magical and fantastic, and that they stirred some sort of energy inside of you. And so this is really about pausing to remember who you are. When you are not on that rat race, when you are not on that hamster wheel, who are you? Who are you when you are composed and connected to yourself. This is about learning to restore yourself. This is learning to re-establish yourself in your essence. It's not that disconnected person that is just out there running off to-do lists. This is about re-establishing at an essential level. And this is about recreating. So we talk about recreation, but each and every single one of us, I'm one of those people who, when you used to talk about creative stuff and all that kind of things, I would be shouting the loudest, I'm not creative. There is no human being on earth that is not creative. The challenge is that we are locked in our heads. Our heads is not where creativity lives. Creativity lives at the intersection of emotion, heart, and soul. Emotion and soul, right? So creativity is about, you get to create when you pause. That's when the ideas come. That's when the what ifs come. That's when the daydreaming happens. And if we don't create the space, we cannot connect into that part of us. Now, here's the funny thing. Mel, if you are tired a lot, chances are it's because your creativeness is not being expressed. You're running off tasks, but you are by nature designed to be creative. And if there's no space for your own version of creativity to come to life, you are going to be exhausted because the work you are doing is consuming energy, but not creating energy. But when we are in our creative selves, we restore our energy. That's where we can sit for hours and hours and hours doing something. After our back and our bums are sore already, we can still sit. Why? Because we're engaged. And this is about reconnecting to yourself, and this is about renewing yourself. Okay? And when we are in that 4 parts of us intertwined, we are able to do this. So in many ways, and I've spoken about this yesterday and I'll speak about it today, in many ways, it's a journey of healing. There are scars that we have inside of us that make us react, puts our nervous systems on guard. And until we start reappraising how we're engaging with life, we will be continuously on guard and we will be continuously exhausted because we are working and deploying energy for things that actually don't need our attention. I want to just stop and say that there are many dimensions to you. I've spoken about this, the 4 parts, the heart, mind, body, and soul, over and over and over. And I will continue to speak about this over and over because it is in us making space for these 4 parts of us to return to wholeness, where we will feel our completeness, where we can start living wholeheartedly. I know that I didn't live wholeheartedly, and I think I said it in some space. I can't remember if I said it in this space. I can't remember my 30s because I wasn't present to my 30s. I was so busy. I was in my head. I didn't know what I was doing. I know I was hitting goals, but I didn't know what my life was. And this is true for so many people, right? So we have amnesia about big parts of our lives because we're not present to it. So we've got to start making all our parts welcome. And I spoke yesterday in the emerging zone of awareness, of consciousness, how that is where we start to learn to make the different parts of us welcome, even the parts that we might have tabooed. When we taboo parts of ourselves, we are harsh and judgmental towards ourselves, and our judgmentalness makes us tired. It makes our nervous system work much harder. Beverly is saying, very true, yes. Yeah, the rat race. And we lose out in life. The busyness is not good for anyone. So we've got to make all parts of ourselves welcome, and this is why I'm so passionate about self-love as part of creating balance in our lives, because self-love talks about accepting ourselves and forgiving ourselves, pardoning ourselves, and loving ourselves in spite of everything. And we've got to start creating a space where work and play is not separate parts of us. When we are, so separate, and that is when we talk about balance. We talk about balance because there are 2 separate parts. But when we are integrated, we know how to flow between the various parts. We know how to bring work into life, and we know how to bring life into work. And we know how to be whole in all these parts. one of the most tragic things that we do in the workplace, and I am so passionate about this because I've seen the scars on so many people's souls, is that we work in a way where, we swipe our access card at the turnstiles of our jobs, even if we don't have actual turnstiles, and we walk through with our bodies and our hands and maybe a part of our minds, but our hearts and souls lie on the other side of the turnstile. And that is so disintegrated. We've got to be integrated because that is exhausting to your nervous system. You're not in a resilient state when you've left your heart and your soul behind, because your resilience requires connection through all of you. Okay? So this is a diagram where I'm really talking
Sophia,
about... Yes.
Sorry to interrupt there.
Sorry.
It's so true what you say. You see people coming to work, but they do leave that part of them behind. How do we as employers recreate that in our staff? I don't know if that's like even a reasonable question at this point.
No, it's a very reasonable question. First and foremost, of course, you hire me. I help you do that.
Of course.
That's my jam. So one of the best ways you can do it, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to rush through it, is you have brain resting, brain activating conversations with them. You use the brain science. So there's this little formula called RAMP. It's on one of my YouTube videos. You engage with what they feel related to. How do they connect to the workplace? How do they connect to each other at the work, at the job? How do they connect to the job and to the task? How does the job connect to the life that they are creating outside? That relatedness, how do you make that connection? How do you stitch it together to them so it isn't separate? A is for how do we create a degree of autonomy for them? Something that they can own for themselves, even if it is the schedule for when people have tea. It doesn't have to be big stuff. The schedule for when people have birthday cakes. There are ways in which every human being at work can have some sort of autonomy and allow them to choose what they are autonomous about. M is for mastery. We all want to do good stuff. We want to leave our fingerprints on the stuff that the company creates success around. So what do they want to become masterful at? We keep changing people's jobs. They were busy doing this, then we give them something else, then we give them something else, then we give them something else, so they don't become good at anything. Every single one of us needs mastery. That helps our brains to flourish, it helps our egos to grow, it helps us to just feel good about, getting a pat on our back. Then the last part is purpose. Why do you come to work? And this isn't the company's purpose. The company's purpose is bullshit to most people. Like when I was working at F&B and they said to me, oh, our target is 4 billion this year. I couldn't care. Like I genuinely couldn't care. It wasn't even my 4 billion. I didn't care. So what is my purpose for coming to work? And these are conversations. I've got some other diagrams I can show you separately, but the foundation of a healthy company culture rests on conversation, that connective tissue that lies between human beings. The connective tissue that lies between human beings is conversation, conversation, conversation. If you want to be good at business, become good at conversation. Does that answer your question now? I know I rushed through it, but...
No, it did. Yeah, thank you. But we can always take this offline because there's a few things I want to chat with you about. Thanks.
So when we talk about heart, mind, body, and soul, we've got to start asking, so what does each part offer and what does each part ask for? What does your body desire in order to feel rejuvenated? What does your emotional body seek in order to be rejuvenated? What does your mental body need to be rejuvenated? What does your spiritual body ask for in order to offer that resilience? And so what is important for us to understand is that our physical body needs comfort and pleasure. So your staff, they need comfort and pleasure at work. Don't put them in crap seats. But at a personal level, what brings you comfort and pleasure? What do you need to have around your job that gives you comfort and pleasure? Do you have coffee in a mug that makes you have a little smile on your face? Do you have a snack that is just really special for you? What does your body need? And if you ask your body will tell you. And very often you might say, oh, my body is tired, it wants rest. You know what my experience is the first time I did this particular exercise? The first time I did this exercise, and it's a meditation, and if you want, I can make the meditation available to you. I was in the meditation and I asked my body, what do you want? And she said to me, I want you to go and move your ass. You are too still. So yes, I was tired physically, but I ended up going for walks. And when I go for a walk, I feel great. And Beverly mentioned earlier on, she's not going for her run. If you are not physically moving, it is an exhausting experience for your body. We are not designed for sitting at our desks. Okay, I'll give you the meditation now. What does your emotional body need? Your emotional body needs validation. So every time we push our emotions away, we are not validating ourselves. And I was like, I'm back to self-love. Self-love is the essence of validating all of the parts. It's not about tabooing any of our parts. It's about making space for all of it. Is that noise from outside coming on here, or are you hearing me clearly?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay.
I don't hear anything.
Oh, there's a...
I can also hear you clear. I hear there's a booming sound, but it doesn't...
It's car washing time here. So anyway, so what does the mental body need? The emotional body wants validation. Don't taboo your emotions and reject your emotions. It wants to be heard. Your emotions want to be heard. We just don't have the skill. No one ever taught us how to make space. We do have an understanding of how to make space for our physical body's needs. We pamper, we jog, we do gym and all those kinds of things. But we are not taught how to make space for our emotional bodies. This is a skill we must craft and hone if we seek to save our sanity and save the workplace. What does your mental body need? So your mental body is always asking for a job because your brain seems to think it needs to be busy all the time. Your brain needs certainty and understanding. Your brain wants to know, what is the next thing that I'm going to do? What is the next thing? When I get there at 5 o'clock, are they going to be there to open the door for me? Or am I going to have to stand outside? So your brain wants certainty. And your spiritual body invites trust, faith, and belief. Okay? And so these are big things for us to get our heads around. And we need skill to craft activities and practices that allows us to do these things. So I just want to pause here for a moment and ask you, do you actually have permission to pay attention to your body? Because if you're getting up, you're jumping into the car and you're sitting in traffic and you're getting to work and you're doing the rat race and you've got an essence of, I must do that, then do you have permission to break with the rules of, or your perceived rules with the work? Do you have permission to negotiate for yourself? Do you have permission to recreate your day so that you can pace your job and your day in a way that serves what your needs are, so you can remain energized and alert to your needs as well as your employer's needs? And have a conversation with yourself. In the workbook, I do offer you a bit of journaling, but have a conversation with yourself. Beverly, do you have something you wanted to say?
No, that's fine. I'll type it here in the...
Okay. Okay, I'll do the meditation. So what creates resistance for paying attention? And when I say paying attention, I'm talking about paying attention to your needs, for what your body needs, for what your soul needs, for what your heart needs, for what your mind needs. If we don't pause to pay attention, things happen to us. They don't happen for us. Okay? And then the question is, are you willing to take action? Because if you're not willing to take action, then the only other thing that you can do is accept that you're going to be exhausted and depleted. The only thing that you cannot do is accept that you're going to be run down and that you are not going to get to those parts of your life that makes life worth living. And I've said this before, the question is always, what do you want? 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 And here's the challenge. Every now and then when you get the answer to what you want, you may need to take a leap of faith. You may need to have a really difficult conversation. You may need to be in trouble with someone a little bit. You may need to be uncomfortable in a context that you know, it's a price that you pay. But can you do that for yourself? And I want to invite you to spend time exploring what a new reality could feel like. You know, if you understand what a new reality could feel like for yourself, and it doesn't have to be like this cataclysmic change to your reality. Maybe all you want is an additional 15 minutes to yourself during the day. Maybe all you want is, instead of eating lunch inside, you want to go and eat it under the blue sky. Then then that is something you can do quite easily. And by the way, I just want to say to you, do you know how many people I've worked with who they do simple adjustments, their day doesn't get shorter, it just gets different. And the amount of energy changes completely. And one of the things that they change is that instead of gobbling their food in a state of busyness, they take 15, 20 minutes and they sit outside and they eat in an open environment. We are designed to be restored by nature. It's almost like you are, you know, like a phone being recharged on a recharging bed. Sitting under the sky is a bit like being recharged. And I want to say to you, this is easy stuff. A lot of the things that energizes you is not hard stuff. It's not tough stuff. But it's about having rituals and paying attention. Mel, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that's actually a brilliant idea, because we've got a canteen and everybody either rushes to the canteen, grabs their food and goes back to their desk while they're busy typing and eating at the same time. And it's so bad because you're not being mindful of what that thing is that you're eating, putting into your body, what it's doing, how it's replenishing you or not.
Yeah.
Half the time you forget, your food gets cold.
Yeah.
And it does make sense sitting outside and having something to eat. It's definitely something I will do.
I want you to think of it as solar energy for your spiritual batteries. That is
yes, exactly.
Right. And so then how do you create what you want within the nitty-gritty rituals of everyday life? And I really am saying to you that this is an important question. We are not talking about going off the grid here. We are talking about making life work. And if you become intentional, I guarantee you, I promise you, hand over heart, you can make it work. It requires what Beverly said earlier on. You've got to be intentional, you've got to be intentional, you've got to be intentional. Okay. So this is a journaling meditation, and it is what accompanies the meditation that I'll send you. And this is a question of, my body is. And it's a simple question. Don't overthink the question, my body is what? Right now, in this moment, what is the answer to the question, my body is? Right now, what is the answer to the question, my body needs? If we had more time, I would have loved to have just spent some time just responding to these questions. And if you are willing to do this, set a timer and do it for no longer than a minute. Don't give your mind too much time to get involved. A minute timer is enough to do this and to respond to these questions. You will be surprised by the wisdom that pours out of you if you don't give your brain time to interfere with the answering. Okay? Your heart is always in a particular state, and your heart is always longing for something. Do you know what it is? Your mind is always trying to get a job for you, to give it some sort of job. But perhaps what it really wants is to pause, to be entertained, to be humored. And what does your spirit want? What does your spirit desire? My challenge to you, if you are open to accepting this as an assignment, is to do this for 1 minute every day for about 10 to 12 days and to start seeing what happens for you. There is wisdom locked inside of your body, mind, heart, and soul. And it is your responsibility to go and access it. This is like mining for wealth. This is true wealth that you are mining for by engaging with these questions. And to answer your question, Mel, around how you do this for your staff, you can literally have check-ins like this with your staff members if you are brave enough. And I would say to you that if you've done this for yourself for a while and you start noticing the benefits, it becomes easier to do it with your staff, because you can really then you can facilitate a real conversation, a human-to-human conversation. And human-to-human conversations recharge people in ways that no amount of sleep can recharge you. No bonuses recharge you like this. So I just want to come back. This is about integration. This is not about constantly learning new things and constantly bringing on board new stuff. Whatever you've got in your tool of resources, once you've got the answers to those questions, integrate the answers. Don't go and experiment with a lot of different things. Living well is simple. Living well, living wholeheartedly is ridiculously simple. It's when we complicate things, when our brains get involved with shiny object stuff, when our brains get all squirrely. Don't. Just integrate small, simple things. If this week your intention is, I'm going to speak to my 4 different parts, I'm going to integrate them, and I'm going to go and have lunch under the sun, under the sky. Integrate that until it no longer feels like the thing that you're doing, until it just feels like how you operate. Right? Integrate it so it becomes part of the way in which it becomes part of who you are, not what you do. Okay? And I said earlier on, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Pausing is about finding space to pay attention. You are always in a state of communication. The problem is just that you're not picking up on the narrative. And when you're not picking up on the narrative, you're only really tuning into the stuff that scares the crap out of your nervous system. Because your nervous system is there to keep you alive. But there's other stuff that's being communicated. And when you pay attention, you are able to see past what the sympathetic nervous system is doing, and you can start going into your parasympathetic nervous system. You know, para is to parachute and to slow down. So we've got the very agitated nervous system, which is our sympathetic nervous system. But when you pay attention, you go into para mode and you start having restful attention. And restful attention is where the wealth sits, where the good stuff sits. So my invitation to you is, make space to pay attention, and those questions that I have on that list is one of the mechanisms that you can use to pay attention. I also think it's just so important that when we pay attention, change happens fast. Change happens very fast when we're paying attention. 70% of change is estimated to becoming clear on what our desired outcomes are. What do you want? And are you paying attention to your limiting patterns? The moment you start knowing what your limiting patterns are, then you'll start dissolving them. But it's when it is unknown to you, then they start running the show and controlling you and hijacking the crap out of you. 15% of transformation is not about learning new things, it's about letting go of old patterns. It's about letting go of the things that keep us separate from ourselves. And 15% is about learning new things. So there's a formula here that you can see and you can evaluate what you're doing against. The last one is, not the last one, second last one is take action. You know, small actions make big differences. So very often what we do is we're thinking about this big thing that we want to bring into our lives, this big thing that we want to consider. Leave the big things, just los it. Los je groot goed. Do the small stuff. The small stuff build momentum, and before you know it, you think to yourself, oh my God, it's so different. There's not going to be a point in time where everything is perfect, but it's just like so different. I was actually having a thought today and I was thinking, something happened, something very small happened, but I was thinking, yeah, a year ago this time, that kind of thing would have had me annoyed. And now I was just like, oh, how fascinating. You know, so small changes over time make for massive changes. We all know that example of, you know, if an aeroplane changes its direction by 1 degree or a millibit of a degree, over time, that small change over time, change and over distance, changes where the plane was going to land, even though the change at the beginning was a small degree. I know that doesn't sound very coherent, but I think you know what I mean.
Wow. No, it does. Makes sense.
Okay. And so we're looking for the ripple effects and make the ripple effects come to life. You don't need big stuff. I'm like very passionate about you don't need big stuff. And I want to also say that rest is your superpower. And I don't mean rest as in only sleep. I mean rest as in whatever it takes to make you feel activated. Sometimes it's reading a book, sometimes it's having a facial, sometimes it's going for a walk, sometimes it's playing with whoever, your kids or whatever, sometimes it's listening to music, sometimes it's dancing and doing something exciting, sometimes it's climbing a mountain, if you live in Cape Town, going for a hike. Right? Know what repertoire of rest you need. Right? And I want to say sleep, rest, all these things are really, really important. What these things do for your nervous system, you can never, ever calculate, you can never estimate it. When you rest, when you do restorative stuff, you come down from your fear and triggered state. Without thinking, without having to do any deep work, it just through your body, your mind eases, your soul relaxes, your emotions, they wash out of you. When you are sleeping and when you're resting, when you're going into alpha brainwaves, delta brainwaves, theta brainwaves. By the way, we all need to get into delta and theta brainwaves as frequently as possible. We need our 7 hours of sleep and we need to meditate because this stuff washes things out of our brain. Harmful toxins that causes things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. These things live in our brains because we don't give our brains downtime. Downtime is just so important for our brains. And so many people have the best ideas when they are in downtime because there are connections that are being made that can't be made in our beta brainwave. Rest optimizes it's a spelling error, decision making and performance skills. And it really, really helps you with your resilience. And I want to remind you that, and I've said this like so many times, I want to remind you that there is balance in all things. All things matter. It's not that your job is more important. Your body needs rest, all kinds of rest, sleep, all these kinds of things. And when you think of your rest, think of it as virtuous. Think of it as plugging into your superpowers. You can't make good decisions when you are tired. You make bad decisions when you're exhausted, right? And we've all got practice with that. And then in conclusion, I just want to remind you again that when you rest, your capacity to give yourself compassion is greater. When you rest, when you are restored, when you are unified, your willingness to go where it is unknown, your courage is greater. Your ability to work with yourself is greater. Your ability to remain coherent is greater. Your ability to remain in charge of who you are is greater. Your ability to shine for yourself and to have luminosity in the world is greater. These are all very, very important things, but you strip yourself of these things if you live separate and disconnected lives, when you are disconnected from yourself, and when you are not tuning into what it is that you need at the highest level. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left, 7 minutes by my estimation for this thing kicks us out. Are there any questions that you want to ask? Or comments that you want to share?
It could keep us busy for the whole evening, but this was absolutely valuable. There's a lot of meat that you've given us tonight. So definitely.
The only thing that I'm sad about is that if this is like a day-long conversation and there's activities, there's actual reflection, actual integration, but unfortunately that's not available in this space. But I really, really want to say to you, this is enough for you to get started on a journey.
It makes me actually miss the session that you did. Remember when you did a session with you there? I think the interaction for me, yes. that interaction was awesome. But sure, I always enjoy your sessions, whether it's online or in person. You always give us something that we walk away with, that we can, you know, kind of work into our lives or just revisit. It's always just so amazing. I always walk away feeling like I've learned a lot and I've got a lot that I can actually try and work with or change or put back in that I'd forgotten. So yeah, thank you.
Mel, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier on. And I'm saying this to you in particular. I'm sorry this is not being recorded, but don't make it complicated. Make it simple. Make it so brain dead simple that you can do it. Because what our brains like to do is our brains like to make it complicated. Because when you access your heart and access your soul, your brain is like, hey, are they not going to, like, you know, move in on my territory? So your brain wants to make things complicated, so you maintain the status quo. Don't make it complicated. If it's as simple as having your coffee outside, you do that. You know?
Absolutely. No, thank you, Safia.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to run another qualified to be you. I hope you'll come.
Yes, absolutely. I need one.
Yeah, I'm thinking of actually making it a 2-day thing, but anyway, maybe another day. Okay, cool. Beverly, anything from your side before we part ways?
Nothing further. Thank you so much for this evening. It was very good. Thank you.
It's my absolute pleasure, and I'm so glad that you joined me. And you must enjoy your evening tomorrow. We are all very jealous.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye, ladies.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
Melissa. Bye.
Have fun.
Thank you. Bye.